Okay, good. Our first panelist is Joel Robison. Okay, so not this is a separate. I forgot to edit this a bit. It's Robison with no N. Okay, so that's my fault. Apologies for that. But I would like to hand the mic off to Joel to introduce yourself to this song we hear, and feel free to tell us a little bit about yourself.
All right, well, as Sensei said, my name is Joel. I use they, them pronouns, and I've been in Tacoma for going on 6 years now. I moved from Oregon. I grew up in Oregon, attending Baptist church and Foursquare church with my parents. And then I ended up deciding to come to Pacific Lutheran University here in Tacoma. And I liked it so much that I just never left. And so here I am.
Thank you, Joel. And now, and actually, go ahead and push this mic over here to Charlie. And our next panelist for today is Charlie Reneau. And he is from the Oregon Buddhist Temple, but I am going to let him introduce himself. So, Charlie, please introduce yourself to the Sangha.
My name is Charlie Reneau, and I've been attending the Oregon Buddhist Temple since 2007. When I moved to Portland, and I've moved around a bit, but my family is from Chattanooga, Tennessee, and I think that's the short version. I think we'll get a lot of the details later. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Charlie. So let's begin our discussion. And before we begin our discussion, with the panelists, you will all note that I passed out these little yellow cards, and you might need a pen a little bit later. And there's pens in the back if you need them. I'll go and get those and pass those around in just a bit. But I'd like to try to keep the seminar part as quote-unquote orderly as possible. So if you have a question for our panelists, if it comes into your mind, especially during this discussion part, please feel free to write the question down. And then at the end of the seminar, we will actually have a wrap-up session where all of you can, or those of you who have questions, you can get your questions answered. So, please feel free to think about, questions as our panelists are talking. But let's go ahead and begin our discussion with some initial questions for the panelists. So, for both of you, especially since you did not grow up with the Buddhist temple, how did you first hear about Buddhism? What was your first encounter with Buddhism? Tell us about that story. We'd love to hear it.
Do you want me to go first? Do you want me to?
Go for it.
Okay. So, I've been exposed to Buddhism in a number of ways. I think learning about, a little bit in school, but then kind of coming to a place where I had lost a lot of religion and deciding to do some research on my own. Deciding that I needed something that aligned with my own values instead of trying to align my values with something that I couldn't quite get behind. And so my first exposure to Buddhism was through just a book called The 12 Major Religions of the World, and reading through that and seeing myself described in the Buddhist section. And then kind of dove into that and started doing some more research, listening to Thich Nhat Hanh and the Plum Village lectures and dharmets, and and then ending up here.
The first time I had any meaningful encounter with Buddhism was writing a project in middle school on the world's major religions, and in the I'm sure very highly engaged scholarly study that I was doing at that time, Buddhism spoke to me, called to me. My family is Episcopalian, and my grandparents were all Southern Baptist. And so I was raised in a Christian tradition, and I'm pretty familiar from an experiential sense about what it was like to be a member of a Christian church. But this other thing that I'd learned about in these books sounded really interesting to me, and I think that interest was mainly intellectual. I think I was learning about Buddhism from the perspective of Western writers writing about the metaphysical, philosophical, intellectual tradition of Buddhism. This was really light on the specifics of Buddhist practice, but I thought it was really interesting intellectually. And when I talked to my parents about that, they were both very supportive, and my dad ended up kind of supplying me with books about Eastern philosophy that would be familiar if you lived through the 70s. Alan Watts and other writers writing about Hinduism, Buddhism, from, again, that philosophical perspective, to the point that when I was about to be confirmed in my mother's Episcopal church, so confirmation class is like a year-long class, and at the end of a certain point you graduate. And you may have been baptized when you were a child, as I was, but then you go through confirmation class and you actually kind of sign on the dotted line, and then you're now officially a Christian. I had a very odd phone call with the Sunday school teacher. She said, we just wanted to confirm, we didn't see your name signed up on the confirmation class list, and you've been coming to Sunday school. I just wanted to make sure that you're actually going to be there for confirmation class. And I said, oh, actually, no, I think I'm going to become a Buddhist instead. And she said, oh, really? And at this time, we were living in Sioux City, Iowa, and there aren't a whole lot of Buddhist temples there. There actually was at least one, but it was a Vietnamese immigrant temple, and to my knowledge, at the time at least, they didn't do anything in English. So I could have gone, I could have visited, and I probably could have made some kind of membership there at that point, but I was in high school, and I'm probably not capable, didn't have the wherewithal to put that together. So at that point, though, I really did identify as a Buddhist.
Oh, well, I guess, yeah, I can add a little bit to my story. So when I came out to my parents as queer, I felt a lot of rejection and a lot of shame around that. And so I felt that it was not in my best interest to continue practicing Christianity. And so when I was about 16 was when I stopped attending church with my parents, and I kind of fell into a world of nihilism and pessimism as far as, the religious experience. And it wasn't until college, and ironically, I decided to go to a Christian school, but I really sort of found through my studies of anthropology that religion plays an incredibly integral role in the human experience and in the way that we understand the world and how we connect with people. So it was at that point that I really saw a gap that was not filled, a vacuum that was not filled for me. And at that point, that's when I started, again, researching different religions, seeing what kind of aligned with my own values, and having, I took a philosophy class as well. So it was faith and reason. And for me, I wasn't getting a lot of faith and reason from Christianity, at least in my own point of view. And so I was having a really tough time, but it was really a confirmation for me that I needed to find something else. And so once I did end up, finding Buddhism and really understanding a lot of the values, that's when I would say, like, things really started to click into place for me. And I was able to recognize, too, how religion functions for other folks, even who don't necessarily align with my own views, and seeing what value it brings to understanding the world, to understanding things that we don't understand, and really just processing the unexplainable for me. Yeah.
You too.
Share this one? Perfect.
Okay. Wow. Thank you both. I mean, amazing stories. Thank you very much for being so open and being willing to share with us about your history and about your first encounter with Buddhism, and then even some family hardship. I mean, that's definitely something I cannot relate to, because I was very privileged and very lucky growing up in a tradition, or growing up in something where I didn't have to experience that, and I can't imagine. It's hard for me to fathom, but and as much as I cannot fathom it, I'm very happy that you're here, and that we're able to that you found a place that you feel very welcomed. But we're going to get into a little bit more of that. But we're going to go into the next question of, so in Buddhism, what were some of the teachings that stuck with you? And then I know that Charlie briefly mentioned, Alan Watts, and I've listened to Alan Watts extensively too. But Joel and Charlie, please tell us, what were some of the teachings in Buddhism that were really like, oh wow, I can either relate to that, or I like that, or that clicks with me. We'd love to hear your thoughts on some of these teachings that have been given over your exposure to Buddhism.
If I could characterize my emotional state for most of high school, it would be an obsession with music, performance, and anxiety about music and girls. And I had these crushes on girls, and I never asked them out, except for a couple times, and it was just kind of like I was anxious. I got a lot of anxiety in general. And at the time, reading about Buddhism in books, I think the most important thing I took away was the Four Noble Truths, and then an application of the ideas in the Four Noble Truths that the universe isn't wrong itself. Like, the universe is the way it is. It is neither your fault nor the universe's fault, but you're going to have some suffering in life. And that reduced the anxiety that I felt a lot, because it helped me put a little bit of context into the strong emotions of a teenage boy. And when I was at my parents' church, there was a lot of talk about the Bible. And I remember a particular Sunday school class where the reading happened to be a section of the Bible where a certain man dies, and then, because that was church tradition at the time, his wife had to marry his living brother. And I remember just thinking, oh, this is a really weird philosophy. This is really weird. I don't know. And then like the idea that Jesus died, but then he came back, and he left again, and he's gonna come back again. That, it seemed unbelievable to me. And since faith in that sequence of events, in a physical sense, faith that those things happen specifically, was a really important part of even a very liberal Episcopalian tradition that my family was part of, it didn't resonate with me. It didn't seem like that was a very direct answer to the problems that my life, my little teenage life presented. So it didn't resonate the way that the idea that sitting quietly in a room and meditating can answer the stresses of life that come with the first noble truth. So yeah, the Four Noble Truths.
Well, as I shared a little bit, I grew up in a Christian tradition, and there was a lot of shame wrapped up in that, and not feeling like I was enough in who I was. But I think the converse to that was when I started to believe, that I do have everything that it takes to be a whole person, and I think that that's a huge part of what Buddhism taught me. That, you have everything that it takes, you have the potential, and you don't need to seek something outside of the truth of, the Dharma or anything other than, recognizing things for the way that they are. I think that I really do relate a lot to experiencing a lot of anxiety and having that experience in knowing that there is going to be suffering, but that the way that we interact with the world and the way that we choose to respond can change our emotional state and can really change, not who we are, but how we feel. I also really, really appreciated just the recognition of all the causes and conditions, and feeling incredibly lucky that I land where I am because of a myriad of different things. And many of them I don't know. Like, I don't know what brought, you or you in, but I know that it has changed my experience here today. And it has ultimately allowed me to have so many of the privileges that I have to be here, to be a member of the temple. And so I really appreciated that. But I also really appreciated the less stringent nature of Buddhism, the liminality that it lends, and knowing that, well, things could be this way, but they could also not be this way. Or maybe both are true, even though they're opposing. I think that brought me a lot of comfort. And so I would say that those were my main takeaways when coming to Buddhism.
Oh man, I wish, we got to start a series where, we invite our Sangha members to speak more on a regular basis, because we got a bit of a Dharma talk there. And even Joel uses words like myriad. That we use that all the time, and it's like the three treasures, even through myriad ages of cultists, right? So thank you both, man. These are such great answers. Love them. Okay. So with this in mind, now it's time. You talk a lot about sort of what was going on inside, internally, right? Sort of seeking inward, what your religious ideology or spiritual journey was. So now I'd like to kind of shift more towards, more towards actively seeking out a community to be a part of, right? So, since the whole since the whole name of this seminar is, finding the temple. I'd love it if you both talk a little bit about that. Did you seek a temple specifically, or did you just happen to find it? And how did you find the temple? I mean, obviously now with the internet, everything, but did you explore other traditions? Or did you try Zen temples? Did you try Tibetan monasteries? Tell us about that. I'd love to hear a little bit about your actual physical journey in, finding or walking to a temple.
First off, major props to Joel for the word liminality, one of my favorite words. It's just a beautiful word. Love it. So I went to college in Georgia, where I think there might have been some kind of Buddhist group at the University of Georgia, but I didn't look for them. And then I moved to New York City for grad school, and I thought, okay, this is it. This is the chance. There's got to be a Buddhist temple in New York City. And so I got on the 2004 era internet and looked for New York Buddhist temple. And the website that came up was the New York Buddhist Church, which I didn't know about the history of the use of the term temple and church, but I thought, okay, this looks interesting. And I looked through a bunch of different websites for sanghas in New York City, and New York Buddhist Church was the only temple of any kind that offered a service where you didn't have to pay. You just go to the service. And that seemed that was perfect. Grad school, did not have a whole lot of money, wasn't so sure I wanted to pay $20 to do an all-day meditation retreat when I maybe didn't have the whole day. So the New York Buddhist Church just said, come on Sunday morning, and I went on a Sunday morning, and then it was like, oh, I go every Sunday. I started going again and again, partly because they continued to not make a hard ask for money, which I did not have, but also because it was Sunday morning and I had that time free typically, whereas other times of the week were very busy for me. So only later, when I was living in Honolulu, did I visit any other Buddhist temple. I went and visited a Nichiren temple one Sunday morning. And I thought it was pretty cool because the chanting was really fast. But it didn't have the same attraction as the Jodo Shinshu temples that I'd been visiting.
Oh, wait, before you give the mic to Joel, do you remember, Charles, who the minister at the New York temple was at the time?
Reverend Nakagaki.
Ah, I've heard that name. I've actually never met him in person, but I have heard that name. Anyone in the room here? Okay, 10 minutes. Okay. Donna? Reverend Nakagaki?
He's coming.
Oh, he is?
Actually, to Seattle in August.
Oh.
Is that the one? Yeah. So I'm going to be at it.
Oh. Oh, interesting.
He was really good. He gave a whole Dharma talk on an explication of 3 words. And the words were, or maybe not. And the whole Dharma talk was just like, oh, I think this is really true. Or maybe not. And it's just really I'll always remember that. And we also had Dr. Uno, Tai Uno.
Oh, wow.
Gave a Dharma talk about once a month or so. Just came down on the train and gave a Dharma talk. So it was very interesting.
For those of you who do not know, for those of you who do not know, Reverend Dr. Tai Tetsu Uno is by far one of the most accomplished and celebrated scholars of the Buddhist Churches of America and the Jodo Shinshu tradition, and a lot of his work has been published, and we do have a lot of his work inside our temple library. And I'm certain that if any of you are part of, especially if any of you are part of the Buddhist temple and the Buddhist Churches of America, his books are I guarantee his books are in your library. So his work is very easy to find and very easy to access and very, very easy to read. So, that's why it's such a, wow, you got to hear Reverend Tai Tetsu Uno speak. Very, very cool. Joel, tell us about your journey to finding a temple.
Sure. So I began practicing on my own, and I don't know how many of you folks started practicing Buddhism on your own, but it's pretty lonely. And sitting in meditation is pretty boring. I mean, that is not, I know, an experience that's universal, but for me, oh my goodness. Like, I'm falling asleep, trying to focus on my breath. Can't tell you how many times I fell asleep. And then I was like, you know what? I don't think, there must be something else out there. And so I felt a need to stop learning about Buddhism and start actively practicing Buddhism. And I think that the learning was so important for me, but I could tell that I was missing something. So I knew I wasn't gonna shave my head. I'm not gonna go live in a monastery. That's, if you can't tell, that's not quite my style. And I knew that I wanted something that was going to be open and accepting. And similarly, I did an internet search and I said, oh, okay, this place has a Sunday service. I'm off on Sundays. And I got a couple of my friends to come with me because, it's kind of nerve-wracking walking into a completely new environment all by yourself. And luckily enough, both of my friends were also fellow students at PLU and knew Eric. And Eric, our first day here at Temple, he said, "Would you like to sit with me? I'll give you, a little bit of the lowdown, what's going on. I'll let you, ask questions at the end. I'll kind of walk you through it." So I was incredibly grateful that I just landed again in those conditions, the right place, at the right time, with the right people. And I just kept coming back. I kept coming back and it kept coming back, even though my friends were like, "I'm not so sure. I think that, we're going to stay home today. I don't want to get up early on a Sunday." And I said, "Okay, that's fine. I'll just keep going by myself then," because I really loved it. And I think that a lot of it too was having a familiar format as well, like coming on a Sunday morning and being a quasi-liturgical service, like having a ritual of like, I know that this is what we're going to do every Sunday. I think that was huge in me finding the temple. And then, yeah, I think I kind of hit most of the questions, right?
Did you explore any other Buddhist temples in the area, or?
So I did some research. I never ended up visiting any because this was the first one I visited. So I just got lucky on my first try. But
We're the lucky ones.
oh, yeah. So I did, and I thought about it too. And I was interested in the Zen community in Tacoma, but I knew that just wasn't the kind of practice that I wanted. So that's why I ended up landing here, doing a little bit of research and saying, this is where I'm going to stay. I'm satisfied and I'm happy.
And we're better for it. Thank you. So, and you both talked a little bit about it already, so we may not need to necessarily go over, this question, but, but actually, let's see, what is the next question? Okay, so actually, let's briefly touch on this question of, do you recall your first temple visit? But, what were some of the things that you noticed? What were some of the things that, what were some of the things that you felt, and, what were some of the things that, you really, like, I don't want to say latched onto, but, like that you're like, wow, this makes me feel really good, or, this, really is the place I'd love to continue coming to. You mentioned that, you kind of mentioned the ritual, but I'd love to hear a little bit more about that, so.
Right, so I had done all this reading about Buddhism, but I had no idea how Buddhists actually practiced in the real world, in real life, in Asia, in North America, and wherever on the whole planet, right? And so the first time I went to New York Buddhist Church, A, pews, B, organ, C, Amida Buddha described in a way that to my untrained ears sounded a lot like Jesus, right? And so my first thought was like, this is not really Buddhism. I don't know what this is, but this is not Buddhism. And I don't believe it. And honestly, I had this really strong visceral reaction. I wouldn't say it was negative because it was very interesting. Obviously, I came back, but I almost couldn't decide if I liked it or not. The first, some number of times that I visited. But I think the strength of the Dharma talks that Reverend Nakagaki gave, and the clarifying effect they had on me when I understood the meaning of Amida, and then as soon as I understood the history of the Japanese American community in this country, all of the questions that I had were answered. That, oh, there's an organ because that was the way the Congregationalists sang their hymn, and a lot of these hymns, these gathas, are from a Congregationalist church. They just put Buddhist words on them. Pews, because it looks like a church, and that's what we do in North America. And all of those insecurities that you might say that I had when I first started attending the temple were answered in a way that made me feel, oh, this is, I feel secure. This is good Buddhist teaching, good Buddhist Dharma here. This is not incongruent with what I knew before. But that first time it was like, whoa.
Actually, Charlie, before you put the mic down, could you talk a little bit about your initial experience at Oregon, now that you were an Oregon Buddhist Temple member, and I should mention was the president for a little bit, but could you talk a little bit about your experience, your initial experience at the Oregon Buddhist Temple?
Yeah, so after grad school in New York City, I happened to luck into a job playing in the Honolulu Symphony in Honolulu for a year. So I moved from New York to Honolulu, and I thought, oh, this is great. There's got to be a Jodo Shinshu temple, and there are many. I went to the Mo'iliili Temple first, which is it's a really nice church in a nice neighborhood. But now looking back, I'm like, what? But there were too many families with young children. And I was, like 24 years old, and it's just not my speed. Now I'm like, that was great. Why did I not go there? But so I ended up going to the Bensuin on the Pali Highway. And that was a lot of retirees, one couple of which, they were probably the younger members of that temple, and they were maybe their 50s. And they sort of took me in under their wing, had me out for lunch after service sometimes. So if I had any doubts about Jodo Shinshu, by the time I got to Honolulu, I was very comfortable in that environment. And then when I moved to Portland, because I got a job in Portland, I immediately figured out what was the Jodo Shinshu temple in Portland and visited that. And by that point, it was really a pretty familiar format. I would say I was dead set on being a regular attendee, but membership came a little bit later. And I think I was probably the kind of person who sits at the back of the temple, for a couple of years at least. So, but it was very familiar at that point just because of having cycled through those different temples.
Like most people still, even seasoned people still sit at the back, sitting in the back of the temple. Joel, can you tell us about your first temple experience, kind of like what was the thing that grabbed you?
Sure. So I think that one of the things that really, from a philosophical point of view, grabbed me was that it's very low stakes. Like, we are not meant to achieve enlightenment in this lifetime. We're in a world that really throws everything at us to prevent that. And to be like, oh, okay, I'm okay not becoming a Buddha in this lifetime. Like, I don't know how many of you guys ever felt a pressure of like, oh my gosh, am I going to become enlightened? Like, that's a lot of pressure to put on oneself. And so having the opportunity to just practice and just be without the big pressure of like, oh my gosh, like I need to do X, Y, and Z. Otherwise, I'm going to be stuck here again, or I'm going to come back as a dung beetle or whatever, like that was just not it. And so I think that was a huge thing. I think that also, just seeing the community aspect. One of the first times that I came was during a coffee hour, and like being able to see how friendly everybody was, and like the openness of folks to just accept me for who I was, and to see, again, the sense of community that the temple brings to, what could just be a group of random strangers. I think that was really, really important for me. I think that, just the sensory input too of being in the Hondo, the gold altar at the front is like, oh my goodness. Like, I think that my first service, no offense, Sensei, but I don't know that I heard anything because I was just like, oh my gosh, that is so beautiful. But I, taking in all the different art, taking in the altar, taking in the smell of the incense. I think that all of those things were incredibly comforting and just left me with a really good feeling. And of course, like having somebody welcome you at the door or getting a little shout out on your first day, like it was a little bit nerve-wracking, sure. But it made me feel like I was so welcome. And yeah, it just left me feeling good.
No offense taken whatsoever. In fact, it's my job to get you to focus on Anita, so no offense taken whatsoever. Thank you both. Well, wonderful answers and beautiful discourse. Here's a fun question. Since coming to the temple, and actually, like a pre-question as to how long have you actually been coming to, not necessarily as a member, but as a person attending the temple? About a year now, I'd say.
Maybe 2 since 2022, summer of 2022.
Oh, okay, so
Yeah.
2022, and then and Charlie, you've been going to Jodo Shinshu temples for a good while now, but since you started coming regularly to the temple, what are some of the fun events or activities or things that have been done at the temple that you enjoy, that you look forward to? What are some of these things? So, love to hear that.
Yeah, so when I started going to the New York Buddhist Church in 2004, I said earlier I wasn't sure why I came back. I think actually one of the reasons I came back was that Reverend Nakagaki used to lead meditation classes on Wednesday nights. And that was also a time I typically had free. And so I would try to come Wednesday nights in addition to the Sunday mornings. And that was, like Joel talked about, I had tried meditating on myself, and yes, sleeping, being very bored with it. Occasionally, really feeling a wholesome feeling of calmness that came with meditation, but it just didn't grip me in a way that made me want to keep doing it. So, but his guided meditation, which involved, a bunch of chanting and also walking meditation, but some just sitting in silence, was kind of like a loss leader, or like what do they call a door hanger at a retail place, where they get you in the door with something that's kind of interesting, and then they get you long term with other things. And for me, with Jodo Shinshu, it's been like getting me in the door with great Dharma talks, and then keeping me in the door with my community, and building a family around myself, a community around myself, the interpersonal connections. That's at the heart, taking refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Without the Sangha, I couldn't be a Buddhist. So the Sangha has ended up being a very, very important part of the temple experience for me. And so over the years, my favorite parts, my favorite events of the year have become the social things. For example, Obon Festival, where you're just with, your temple family day on for like 3 days in a row, working together in the sun, ends up being a really wonderful experience. And it's taken in the spirit of the Buddha and the Dharma, but it's the Sangha that makes it happen in the real world. So I look forward to Obon every year. My favorite service of the year is probably the fall Ohigan service, because I think that liminal time of the year, the threshold between summer and fall, is just amazing. And I love how the Ohigan, the recognition of that, in the Ohigan service really makes that clear. So.
How do I say this? I'm a huge sucker for food and for shopping. I mean, I love food. You offer me free food and I will be there. So, coffee hour, that was a huge thing for me in the beginning of my temple experience. Getting to socialize with some folks that I would probably not have ever gotten the chance to talk to otherwise was huge. And getting to eat mochi nuts and spam musubi, great. It's just like a plus, but that's what got me there. And so, knowing that was coming up, always super exciting. But then too, I love to shop, so I love Bazaar and I love Obon, getting to buy things and feel like I'm supporting the temple, and getting to take a cute little knick-knack home. How fun, who could ask for more than that? But again, also the community of Obon, and seeing how many people come to the temple to celebrate who aren't typically here. That was so exciting for me. And getting to see all the different dress and the drums and all of the experience of Obon was so special. And then getting to do my first volunteer, sukiyaki, like that was a very fun, hectic experience for me, but I enjoyed it so much. Like it was hard work, but I left feeling like, I had really contributed and feeling like I had helped and just giving me that sense of community. I felt more connected to the people that I worked with, and it was just a really invaluable experience for me.
What was your job at Sukiyaki?
Oh, I was a runner, and then I got through behind ripping open veggies. I was, I was voluntold by Miss Kate. Yes.
That is definitely a very, very common paradigm in the Buddhist temples and the Buddhist churches of America, is being voluntold that you're going to be doing something. And it happens to the ministers too, by the way. So, and briefly, you talked a little bit about this actually, and you mentioned it from the previous questions. But what inspired you to become a full member of the temple, right? Like, what was it that found, because again, don't get me wrong, and you would never, that's the thing, all people are welcome here at Jodo Shinshu temples. You don't have to be dues-paying, card-carrying members to come to temple, to even necessarily help at events, right? If you volunteered for it, I'm certain that we would accept help. When we say all are welcome, right? We mean you don't have to be a member to walk through the temple doors on a Sunday service. So, what inspired you to become a full member of the temple? And for that matter, why Jodo Shinshu?
I never did join the New York Buddhist Church or the Betsuin in Honolulu, and I think for me it had nothing to do with Buddhism. It was just that I didn't know where I was going to end up living for work, and it felt like a really heavy, committed kind of thing to do, and I was too young to really have that appreciation for what it might have given back to me. And even when I moved to Portland, I think it took several years before I became a member, even though I'd been going to the temple for years. And I think if I had to look back at that time, it would have been a sense that actually I'm probably not going to leave Portland a couple years in, where I thought, I can become a member. I have enough money now. I have the disposable income. I want to make a financial contribution. At that point, I had been volunteering, and people asked me to support the temple in that volunteer way. And I thought, at this point, I need to be able to give some money to put my money where my efforts are, as well as volunteering. And then why Jodo Shinshu? Even after I got to Portland, I visited a couple other temples. I've seen them. There's actually a really beautifully, if you're ever in Portland, a couple pictures ago was the Oregon Buddhist Temple. It's really beautiful. I highly recommend visiting. But the Dharma Rain Zen Center is a really beautiful compound, if you want, a collection of buildings with a really beautiful natural landscape in northeast Portland. It's built on a landfill, which I think is just the most perfect Buddhist thing possible. You've taken bits of rubble and turned them into gold, almost in a literal sense. Dharma Rain Zen Center, it's a very interesting, vibrant congregation, but I've never gone to a meditation retreat or anything like that. So I think at a certain point I was like, I found my people, I'm sticking with it. And around that time is when I started joining as far as membership. Yeah.
So I think that a large reason that I was inspired to become a full member was because I wanted not that I didn't prior to being a member, but I wanted a sense of belonging, like of belonging to the community, of belonging to the Sangha, and to get that altruistic reward of pledging and saying, this is something that's very important to me, and this is a way that I can support it financially. But also, like, how can I contribute my talents and my time? And so I think that that was a large part of wanting to be a member, is feeling like I want to be a contributor, an active contributor to our Sangha. I think that a lot of what brought me to and kept me in Jodo Shinshu was the attainable nature of it being a layman's practice, of it being meant for a practitioner and not a monk, and the attainability of, just saying Namo Amida Butsu and knowing that that's enough, and part of the simplicity too of like having somebody there to guide you through and to share the Dharma with you every week. And again, I mentioned it earlier, but having a familiar format was something that definitely kept me coming back. It's like, I know what to expect most of the time. Sometimes it's special, and that's always exciting too. But knowing like what I'm coming into, and then also just the accessibility of, being in English-speaking temple, and feeling like I was welcomed for who I am. Like, I have an incredibly distinct memory of Sensei wishing a happy Pride last year, and me actually crying at the end of service just because, like, I'd never heard that before from a religious organization. And like knowing that I'm accepted for who I am, regardless of my gender identity, regardless of my sexual orientation, and that I do belong here. And so, yeah, I think those were all things that inspired me to come and to keep coming and to be a member.
Thank you. You sure you haven't studied Jodo Shinshu before? You sound very learned already in what the teachings are. So, very wonderful.
100%.
So actually, I should ask you. Julie, we talked about. I think you mentioned about how sort of a familiarity or a familiar format was something that you definitely enjoyed. And this next question is like, what aspects of the Sunday service do you most enjoy? I mean, do you enjoy this? So you must enjoy the sutra chanting and Dharma talks, being with friends. Like, what are aspects of service, Sunday service, which you enjoy doing? I'd love to hear, especially as a priest, I'd love to hear, what these aspects are.
Sure. So I really appreciate Oshoko, like having a moment before service and after service to clear my mind, to center myself, and to say, okay, this is where I am. I'm ready to be here, to be present, or to say, I'm ready to take this into the next week. I think that that's a huge part. Being a choral person too, I think that I know that there's a lot of research to support singing together, chanting together. Quite literally, our brainwaves sync up, and it's just an unmatchable feeling for me. Like when, everybody's sutra chanting together, we're singing Agatha, and it's like, it's not an opportunity I have all the time in my day-to-day life. And so I think that that's something that I find really valuable. I don't think that there's an aspect of temple that I don't enjoy. So it's a little bit hard. It's like asking me to pick my favorite child. I love the Dharma talks. I love sutra chanting. I love it all. So, but I think that those are some of the really keen aspects I have of attending a temple on a weekly basis. Yeah.
I really like what Joel said about Oshoku. On a day-to-day basis, my life as a working person in a family and whatnot, as a member of society, it's all about self-power. And offering incense, bowing before the statue of the Buddha is a very physical way of acknowledging other power. And just as Joel was talking about singing in a choir of other Jodo Shinshu Buddhists, anything we do that's physical happens to the brain, happens to the heart, happens to the emotions. It might feel like it could be, you could experience it as a rote, physical, repetitive behavior, but if it's something you're interested in and something that you have faith in and believe in and experience as a religious, as a believer or a faithful religious person, then it has this effect on your whole emotional being. And without that physical presence and without physical activity, I think it wouldn't have the same impact. Just as meditating is really nice, but if you're in a loner room doing it by yourself, you could just be taking a nap, or you could be reading a book or something. And so the parts of service that, I'm picky with my music. But I did not, when I started going to the New York Buddhist Church, I was like, oh, these songs are kind of weird. And I remember after a couple of years of it, they did that Namo Yabutsu. I said, we don't do it at OBT very often, but that gatha just remains in my mind all the time. If I hear it, or if I were to play it, I immediately am transported to those religious experiences. So even though like the music of the Jodo Shinshu tradition is not like the reason I go to a Buddhist church, it wasn't important to me at the beginning, but now the weight of experiences gives me this instant emotional connection to singing together. And I like the social time afterwards too. I have a lot of friends at the temple, we catch up. We work through temple problems together. We do dishes together. It would be, I'm way too in it, way too long, way too deep to have any individual favorite part, and it can change from week to week. So, yeah, that's as tight an answer as you're gonna get.
That's beautiful answers. Love it. And I'm certain everyone in this room has equally wonderful answers. And actually, we're gonna get to that next part in just a moment, but now let's actually shift a little bit of gears and let's talk about the future a little bit. What do you hope to see in the future of the temples? Like, what do what would you like to see? What are future events that we haven't done yet before? Future seminars or future subjects? What are some of the things that you would recommend to the temples, to start doing. We'd love to hear that if you have recommendations.
That's a great question. That's hard. I think that something I would really love to see, I know this is something that BWA does and that lots of organizations do in the temple, but I would love to see some Sangha outreach to the community and seeing how we can meet people where they are and not worrying about it being a Buddhist activity, but being a humanitarian activity for us. I live downtown, and so I see a lot, and I know that there's a lot of ways that we could show up for our population who's transient, for folks who are low income, for even just doing outreach at Pride. I think that is a great thing that we're going to be doing this year. I would love to see some seminars on kind of contemporary social issues, what it means to be a queer Buddhist, what it means to seek peace in a world that's full of war, things like that. I think that we could really spread our fingers out, even though maybe this is my Baptist showing. I know that we're not an evangelical organization, but I think that it would really be touching for a lot of people and would give us a chance to have some exposure to maybe people that wouldn't see us as an organization that they maybe particularly belong in. Yeah, I think that's that on that for me.
I can't help but look at that first question and then think about, I've been on the board since 2012 with the exception of one of the pandemic years. So this is something that I've been, on the board of the Oregon Buddhist Temple since 2012. And this is just one of the things that we're constantly talking about, or it's underlying some of the more obvious things that we're talking about normally too. That I've seen even in the 20 years since I've been going to Jodo Shinshu temples, I've seen the temples change, and specifically at the Oregon Buddhist Temple, we are losing the members who grew up in internment camps during World War II. Those members are starting to die out. We're seeing changes demographically, obviously. And what I see of the future, or what I hope to see of the future, I have to be really careful about, because I think if you'd ask a Jodo Shinshu Buddhist in Japan in 1880 or so, what do they see for the future of Jodo Shinshu? I don't think they could have conceived of the beautiful flowering of Jodo Shinshu on the North American West Coast in the 20th century. I don't think they could have imagined that it would look the way it does, sound the way it does, or that it would be so beautiful for the hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people who have grown up and lived in the temple for the last century and a half or so. And so what the future looks like to me, I try not to be too prescriptive of it, but I just really want, just like the Oregon Buddhist Temple's mission statement is similar to what this looks like over here. Enduring community, valuing inclusiveness and acceptance, seeking enlightenment through Japanese Shin Buddhist teachings. Something like that should continue to exist at OBT, at the Tacoma Buddhist Temple, in the BCA at large. No matter what the future looks like exactly, that kind of mission, that's what should guide the future. That's really what I hope to see. I could say I want the temple to get a lot bigger, but if it's only people who have not grown up in the tradition, if only people like Joel and Charlie, I feel like it would lose something. So that's what we talk about at the temple board a lot, and I think none of the Jodo Shinshu temples in North America have cracked that nut. None of them have figured out exactly how to do all that. The problem is we're not the only religious organizations with that concern. Religious mainline traditions in the United States and North America and Europe are shrinking. That's the reality of it. Our membership is older and grayer or bald. So if now at the Oregon Buddhist Temple we have a Sunday service and there are little kids running around. I think this is great. It's great to have these little kids running around, but I'm also very aware that a lot of those kids are not going to come to Buddhist Temple after they graduate from high school. They're going to go to college. Wherever they are at college, they're probably going to be too busy. They're not going to, and then that generation is gone. That's the reality that I see a lot at the OBT, and that's something that I think about all the time. As far as like the specific question, future events or future seminars, yeah, all of it's great. Anything we've done at OBT has been really interesting, at least to the people who attended. So,
thank you both. Very insightful and very insightful and very aware answers. So Well, we have had some great discussion. I really appreciate both of your answers, your insights, your willingness to share. This has been a wonderful experience for me, and wow, I love that I get to listen to other folks, give their wisdom on all of these matters as well. So let's go ahead and take a short break, but before we do, let's please give our two panelists a round of applause for such wonderful presentations. So we're going to go ahead and let's take a nice 10-minute break, use the restroom. We have sparkling water in the back, please help yourselves. It is a little warm today. I know it doesn't look it outside, but it is a little on the warmer / humid side, so please drink lots of water and help yourself. And we'll come back in about 10 minutes. You know what, let's come back at 3:15, okay? Let's come back at 3:15. So take a break, stretch your legs, and take a stretch, and get some water. Thank you.
So the question was regarding anxiety. How does Kyoto Shinshu or Buddhism in general, how do I use it as a tool for combating anxiety? I think that for me, a lot of it is a sense of radical acceptance. Like, these are conditions that we live with, and the only thing that we can change is ourselves and our response. Does it always work? No. That's the other thing that I think that is important is, like, failure is also okay. But I think that a large part for me is accepting what is, and then accepting what's in my control and what I can change to make myself feel better. And just knowing that, suffering is a part of life, and that conversely, we can't have those high moments of joy and peace without a sense of the opposite.
I think there's two kind of answers to that for me. One is if I'm just in a kind of a generally anxious period of my life, I will catastrophize about the future of the human race on this planet. And as you may have heard, there are several challenges to the thriving future of humanity and other species on this planet. So there's a wealth of things to be stressed about with regards to that. A very old Buddhist point of view on this might be that the easy way to look at the world is that there's good and bad, and we don't want the bad things to happen, we want the good things to happen, but that is in itself discrimination. And the value of non-discrimination is to look at things and say, I don't know if this is good or bad. And while it's practically, it's really great to say species extinction or the extinction of the human race would be bad. However, that's a very, short-sighted way of looking at it. And it's hard to remember that. So there's that sort of philosophical answer. The more practical answer is that just in the course of going to the temple every week, volunteering at the temple, having a relationship with everyone at the temple really reduces anxiety and other mental stresses in my day-to-day life. I can tell if I haven't gone to temple in a few weeks, and when I haven't gone, all of those things creep up. I mean, when I go to temple, it's not magic or anything, it's just it reduces that load. There's the belief side of it, and then there's the practice side of it. The belief is this sort of ancient Buddhist philosophy, and the practice is I'm with my people listening to the Dharma together.
The one thing I'll add is just reciting the Nembutsu too. I think that brings me a lot of peace. When I'm feeling like things are out of my control, just reminding myself, this is where I find peace, this is where I take refuge, and then just trying to release everything else. And even sometimes, seeing my favorite Gotha, doing a little Vandana in the car, like, that's perfectly okay.
That's a better answer. I'll tell you, I perform in the Oregon Symphony for a living, and so I play trombone. I play about 3 concerts per weekend. I've been doing it long enough that it's not terribly nerve-wracking for me to do. It's not, I'm laid up on the last chair in the trombone section, so it's not super stressful on a regular basis, but occasionally it's stressful, and sometimes, you're sitting there and like, oh, I don't remember how this part goes. But saying Namo Amida on stage frequently, just because it kind of brings me back to reality, but it also reminds me that the whole world is not the Charles Reneau show, which is something that I'm a regular reminder of. And when I say Namo Amida, I might be on stage and I might be like trying to do a great job so the audience thinks I'm a really great player, but saying the Nembutsu helps remind me that I'm just like a little part of this larger picture, whether on stage or the whole world. So, yeah.
Sure. So the question was about our different Christian backgrounds and how we brought that into our current situation and how that's affected our relationship with the temple. So I would say I did have a little bit of resistance, and a misinterpretation of kind of, Amida Buddha being the Jesus of the Buddhist temple. And it's like, that's not quite right. So I think that was kind of a reckoning moment for me where I had to make my own personal kind of exploration about what does Amida Buddha mean to me? How does Amida Buddha symbolize the Dharma and, the wisdom of all the Buddhas? And I think that was a large piece of baggage that I brought in. But also, I was just really resistant to organized religion as a whole, too. I think that I felt like, they were out to get me, like somebody's trying to like point a finger at me and tell me that I'm doing it wrong, or, say that this is what I could do better or whatever. And that just ended up not being the case. So I think that those were the things that I brought in that really challenged me.
My parents are both gay, and it was really lucky for them and for me and my brother growing up that the churches we went to were very accepting of them when we were growing up. So, and this was in the 1990s, the issue of like whether gay people should be allowed to get married was like not even, it was like there were laws against being gay, basically. Right, so, and I really appreciated that growing up, that our family had a church family that was supportive and loving and kind to them. It just didn't believe anything that they said. And so it was for me more about, it's like I'd been trained in how to go to church every Sunday morning and how to be like a pretty chill person at church. But since I didn't believe any of it, it didn't really make sense for me to stick around at the Episcopal Church. I remember asking my mom one time, I think when I was in high school and I was starting to question the beliefs of Christianity, I said, well, what does it mean to you? You keep going to church all the time? And she said, well, for me, it's really about the people. So even then, I had this training in that the exact belief is, maybe important to the faith, but like for her, her way of practicing was to be a really involved church member, even studying to be a deacon and being a choir member. So it was this concept of being part of a community was really important. So I felt like I got more, like training being an Episcopalian than I got baggage, luckily.
Thank you. Oh, yes, Kate.
Okay, so the question was about our first times attending temple, and if there was anything that surprised us, and if there's anything that after our solitary practice, if coming to temple really affected that. Yes. The first time I came to temple, we chanted Amida Kyo. Yeah. That's what Eric's reaction was too when he heard that. He was like, oh, this is a long one. You're in for it now. And so that was like a little bit surprising. I was like, okay, this is going. And then it started to clip along. We started to go faster. I was like, oh, okay, I'm keeping up. I'm doing okay. But I think that also just the practice of Oshoko too was incredibly, it had an effect on me to like kind of associate incense with mindfulness. And so I think that that is something that I really brought into my own personal space, is like, if I need a moment, if I want to do that, then like, I can open up my my altar, offer some incense, and like have a moment to center myself. And so I think that was a big part, but also having something physical iconize, the ideals and the rituals of Buddhism, I think was incredibly important for me too. I think that there was something really to be said for like being able to do a practice and participate rather than just kind of all have it in my head, if that makes sense.
The first time I ever went to a Jodo Shinshu temple and I heard the gathas, it was all surprising because of its superficial similarity to Christianity. So yeah, the surprise was mostly in regards to that. I think longer term or more deeply, the surprise has been just the growing awareness that coming from when I was younger, when I understood religion to be a matter of deep intellectual, metaphysical awakening of some kind. The longer I've been a member of a Buddhist temple, the more I understand that it has to do with doing dishes, digging holes in the backyard, and taking out trash, and you name it, writing emails, trying to get people to respond to emails, trying to remember to respond to emails, and that's a continual surprise to me. If you can't tell, I'm a pretty nerdy guy, and so like this idea that religion is like you've got to use the force of your intellect to like solve this problem of human life, and it's not like that at all. But that's kind of a surprise.
I hate that my answers can be so short, but I was not able to make it to the joint Honko service. Although I would love to continue to make a more concerted effort to involve, rehearsed music in our services. I think that's really special. Because it also helps in another facet for people to have some social activity outside of temple.
That was a Saturday afternoon, right? Or was it Sunday? Was the next
The
morning?
weekend, it was January,
It was January.
very cold weather.
Yeah.
Sorry, I missed that one. Yeah, I don't remember what I was doing that morning, but
And she cut,
And Shintani.
Amy Peterson made it up.
But, don't fret, because Northwest Convention this year, we will be doing that service again for the Sunday service. So
There we go.
you please come to Northwest Convention. Well, maybe I should have let my wife, Reverend Cindy, make that plug, since White River is actually hosting Northwest Convention this year. I get to have fun this year. Well, we are actually a little bit after. I know that clock is a little slow up there, but can we please, once again, give a wonderful round of applause for our wonderful panelists. The only thing that I'm very sad is that, we didn't have more of our members here today, but with the understanding, of course, that it is summer break, summer vacation, people are, probably out of town, going out of town, it's understandable. But I can honestly say this has just been so wonderful to hear both of you speak so eloquently and so honestly about your experiences at our temple. And it really does give me, and I'm certain everyone else here, a real deep sense of hope for the future of our temples. And even if they change, right, or if the makeup of the temple changes, right, it's not necessarily a bad thing. And it's actually a good thing, and that doesn't mean that like Charlie said, that doesn't mean that we have to abandon the old traditions necessarily, but that we can embrace, that there is a way to still embrace some of the old traditions, or the way that the way that we used to do things, but also make space and welcome everybody to our temple spaces as well. So I'm very glad to see that both of you were able to find a temple, where you feel very welcomed. And I certainly hope that we endeavor, all of us endeavor, to continue making that a reality. So thank you both very much for your words of wisdom and your insight. And I want to hear you both speak again. So, this has opened up, I think, a wonderful opportunity for other folks to share their insights with the Sangha. And I look forward to future events where both of you will be speakers on a panel or even leading a workshop of some kind. So thank you everyone for attending. Once again, thank you everyone. Thank you. And thank you to our online guests as well. Sorry you weren't able to be here in person, but I certainly hope you enjoyed the dialogue.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah. Now we are going to go to the fun part of the evening. No, don't get me wrong. This was wonderful and fun as well. But we're going to go into the social hour. So everyone, please feel free to mingle, socialize. And if you want to join me outside, I'm going to be firing up the barbecue now. Okay. For the menu tonight, we have hamburgers and hot dogs. So very easy, and we're getting a head start on 4th of July. A quick question, I want to see a show of hands of this. Who does not want cheese on their hamburger? 1, 2, 3. Okay, so I only have to make 3 hamburgers without cheese. All right. Everyone else wants